The winter of 1888 did not arrive quietly, came down from the north like a verdict. On the open plains of the Dakota Territory, the air changed in a single afternoon. Morning sunlight glinted off melting snow. By dusk, the wind turned violent. By nightfall, it was lethal. And in the small town of Grover's Crossing, population barely 300, no one was ready for what followed. The settlers had seen winter before. They had survived blizzards. They had endured crop failures and prairie fires. Their houses were framed in solid pine, their stoves cast iron, their barns reinforced against wind. They believed they understood the cold. They were wrong. At the center of this story was a man named Elias Harwood, a former railroad surveyor who had traded maps and transit lines for 160 acres of flat, treeless land. Elias was not reckless. He was methodical. He measured twice and cut once. He recorded rainfall in ledgers and noted wind direction before building his barn. His house stood square and symmetrical, built by the book, thick plank walls, tar paper lining, a pot-belly stove in the center room. It looked solid. But winter on the northern plains is not a test of strength. It is a test of systems. The storm struck on January 12th. Temperatures plummeted from 28 degrees Fahrenheit to -20 in less than 12 hours. Then the wind rose to 40 miles per hour, steady, merciless. Snow did not fall gently. It moved sideways in sheets, finding every weakness. Inside his home, Elias fed the stove until the iron glowed dull red. The chimney roared like a furnace stack, and still he felt it. Cold air sliding across the floor like water. Candles flickering from unseen drafts. Frost blooming in the corners of the ceiling. Across town, families were fighting the same invisible enemy. They stuffed rags beneath doors. They nailed blankets over windows. They burned through firewood at a terrifying pace. Some dismantled fence posts for fuel. But the harder they fought the cold, the worse it seemed to get. Because the problem was not the stove. It was pressure. When wind strikes a structure, it does not simply pass by. It creates zones of high and low pressure. On the windward side, air forces its way inward. On the leeward side, suction pulls air out. The hotter the interior, the stronger the draw. The stoves were not just heating the homes, they were powering the storm's entry. Elias realized this on the second night, when he noticed something strange. The hotter he built his fire, the louder the house seemed to breathe. Boards creaked, gaps hissed. It was as if the building itself had become a lung, inhaling cold air and exhaling heat straight into the blizzard. He remembered something from his surveying days in Minnesota, a technique used in temporary rail bunkhouses near the forests. It had seemed excessive at the time, unnecessary. An external air feed. Instead of allowing the stove to pull air from inside the structure, air that had to be replaced through cracks and gaps. The bunkhouses supplied combustion air directly from outside through a controlled duct. It reduced drafts. He had dismissed it as over-engineering. Now he saw the logic. On the third morning of the storm, while winds screamed across the prairie, Elias did something that made his neighbors shake their heads. He let his fire die. For 1 hour, he allowed the house to cool slightly. Then he pulled up to floorboards near the base of the stove and cut a narrow channel through the crawl space, leading to the north wall, the side least battered by direct wind. Using stovepipe sections meant for repairs, he assembled a crude intake duct and ran it beneath the floor, sealing joints with clay and ash paste. He cut a controlled vent near the stove S-base and connected the pipe directly to the firebox intake. When he relit the stove, the effect was immediate. The flame burned differently, steadier, quieter. More importantly, the house fell silent. The hissing stopped. The invisible river of cold across the floor weakened. By supplying the stove with dedicated combustion air, Elias had changed the pressure dynamics inside his home. The fire no longer demanded warm interior air to feed itself. The wind still battered the walls, but it could not exploit the same vacuum effect as before. The temperature stabilized. He measured it carefully, a drop of only 6 degrees overnight, instead of the 18-degree swings he de-recorded earlier in the storm. And his woodpile, once dwindling fast, began to last. Across town, others were reaching desperation. One family attempted to seal their home completely, unaware that without airflow, smoke buildup could turn deadly. Another overfed their stove, cracking the iron from thermal stress. But Ilias's small modifications, simple, almost invisible, had transformed his home from a passive victim into a controlled system. The storm lasted 3 more days. When it finally broke, drifts stood taller than fences. Livestock losses were heavy. Several outbuildings had collapsed under snow weight, and nearly every family reported burning twice their usual monthly wood supply, except one. Word spread quickly. Neighbors came to inspect Ilias's house. They expected thicker walls, extra insulation, some hidden reinforcement. Instead, they found a stovepipe running beneath the floor. He explained it plainly. "You can't just fight the cold," he told them. "You have to manage the air." Over the next weeks, Grover's Crossing changed. Men who had mocked the idea began retrofitting their own stoves. Intake ducts were added. Gaps were sealed more carefully. His houses were studied not just as shelters, but as pressure systems. The following winter arrived just as harsh, but the town burned 30% less wood. Interior temperatures fluctuated less violently, and no one dismantled their fences for fuel. What Elias Harwood understood, perhaps before others did, was that survival on the frontier was not about brute force. It was about understanding forces you could not see. Heat rises, wind pulls, pressure seeks balance. The storm had not been defeated by thicker logs or larger fires. It had been outmaneuvered. The decades that followed external combustion air feeds would become standard practice in cold climates. Builders would refine insulation techniques. Engineers would map airflow patterns with precision instruments. But in January of 1888, in a small prairie town fighting for survival, the breakthrough was simpler. A man listened to his house breathe and changed how it inhaled. That is how Grover's Crossing endured the winter. The sky froze, not by burning hotter, but by thinking differently.